It all began one perfectly lovely day in the big harbor. Yes, an ordinary, everyday kind of day. For everyone. Everyone, that is, except for George. Oh, dear. Oh, dear, George was saying inside. What am I going to do? Theodore knew what he wanted to do that day. George, can we practice steering backwards together? He asked politely. Well, much to Theodore's surprise, George didn't say a word. He just kept on mumbling and grumbling. Theodore gave the best blast he could from his whistle. Well, that startled George. What? Oh, Theodore. Oh, sorry to surprise you, George, said Theodore. I was saying, can we practice steering backwards together? Not now, Theodore. I have more important things on my mind. Theodore sighed. Well, okay, George. Maybe tomorrow will be a better day. Tomorrow? Roared George. Now he seemed really bothered. Tomorrow? Don't even talk to me about tomorrow. And with that, George chugged away, mumbling and grumbling about tomorrow, and leaving Theodore wondering and whispering to himself, tomorrow? What's wrong with tomorrow? And what is wrong with George? Theodore was on his way home when Fodak went by. Fodak, Theodore called. What's tomorrow? Do you know? Sure I know, replied Fodak. One morrow plus another morrow. That makes 2 morrows. Then Fodak laughed at his own joke. Fodak, what's really happening tomorrow? It's important. Well, said Fodak, nothing special. I'm sure tomorrow the sun will come up and the tide will go out. And oh yes, tomorrow George has his hull checkup. Thought Theodore. Just another day in the harbor, said Fodak. Now every year tugboats go to get their hulls checked. The hull of a tugboat is the part that's under the water and it gets full of rust. Little holes also need to be filled in so one day you don't get a leak. Tomorrow George is getting his hull checkup, thought Theodore. I wonder. And off he went looking for his grumpy friend. Theodore went looking all around Willie's Island. No George. Theodore went looking over at the great ocean dock. No George. Where could he have gone? Then, far away up the harbor, Theodore saw George's stack. That was strange. George was heading toward the old scrapyard dock. No one went there anymore. Perfect, said George, looking at an old rusty barge. This was all getting very mysterious, thought Theodore. He decided to follow George and see what was going on. Puffing and puffing, George the Valiant squeezed and squished his big, beamy self behind the rusty barge. Now that was strange. George smiled to himself. I knew I could fit in here. Uh-oh, George wiggled and jiggled. He was stuck. Oh no, I'll never get out of here. Help, cried George. Wait a minute. No one even knows I'm here. Poor George almost felt like crying, which he never, ever does. I'll just turn into a big pile of rust, he moaned. Like this old barge. Theodore peeked around the big old rusty barge. Don't worry, George, I'm here, he said. Theodore, said George. I'll give you a pull, called Theodore, and he got ready to button his tow rope onto George. With a heave and a hoe, and even a hoe and a half, Theodore pulled his big friend George free from behind the barge. Why were you hiding back there? Asked Theodore. It's a secret, whispered George, who was looking very worried. Oh, said Theodore. Does it have anything to do with tomorrow? Yes, it does, said George gruffly. Theodore, can you keep a secret? Of course I can, replied Theodore, who always thought he was very good at keeping secrets. Promise not to tell, said George seriously. Promise, said Theodore. Tomorrow I have to have my hull checkup, George whispered. Oh, I know that, said Theodore. So, repeated George. So, when you have your hull checkup, they scrape you and they fill any holes in your sides and it hurts. Poor George was very upset. I don't have any rust or holes, he went on. I'm shipshape, and I don't want to be out of the water. I'm not a bird. I'm a big, strong tugboat. George the Valiant. Then George lowered his voice. Here's my plan, Theodore. Tomorrow, I'm going to hide behind this barge, and I won't go to my checkup, and no one will be able to find me. Then he turned to Theodore with his most serious look. And you can't tell anyone about my plan. It's a secret. You promised no true blue friend ever tells a secret. Now, Theodore had promised to keep George's secret, and he wanted to be a true blue friend. But he didn't like this plan of George's, not one bit. The next morning, just like Fodak said it would, the sun came up and the tide went out. It was tomorrow. Theodore and Fodak were floating along when Emily caught up to them. Have you seen George? She asked. It's time for his hull checkup. Theodore took a deep breath. He had to keep George's secret. Well, no, not today. I haven't seen George today. Pearl, the pilot boat, came by to lead the tugs to work. She looked worried. Has anyone seen George? He's supposed to be at his checkup right now. It's not like him to be late for anything. Theodore didn't say anything, but he felt very uncomfortable. He didn't like not telling Pearl where George was, but a promise was a promise. Now the work of the big harbor must be done, George or no George. Theodore, Emily, and Fodak followed Pearl out to a cove where there was a big old rusty wreck for them to move. The tugboats buttoned on, with Pearl leading the way. Theodore called, "This is a very big rusty wreck. Where are we taking him?" Emily knew. "Way over to dock number 9. Dock number 9. That was where George was hiding. But, stammered Theodore, that dock is already full. The dispatcher wants us to jam this old rusty wreck in too," called Emily. Fodak noticed that Theodore looked very worried. "Oh, it's only scrap, Theodore," said Fodak. "It doesn't matter if it gets all scrunched up." Well, Theodore felt dizzy. It was George who was going to get scrunched. What should he do? Soon the tugs were approaching dock number 9. Emily noticed that Theodore seemed very quiet. "What's the matter, Theodore?" she asked. Theodore didn't really know what to say. "Emily, do you think it's important for a friend to keep a secret?" "Sure," replied Emily. "If someone told my secrets, I wouldn't be their friend." Theodore was confused. "But what if someone got in trouble, or even got hurt, just because you kept their secret?" "Well, maybe that's different," said Emily. "I think you'd have to decide which is more important, the secret or safety." "Push away," called Pearl. Theodore was startled by Pearl's voice, ordering the tugs to jam the old rusty wreck into the dock. Theodore knew George was hiding behind the other barge. If he pushed, George would be mushed. So instead of pushing like he was supposed to, Theodore secretly pulled. "Theodore, you are pulling," boomed Pearl. "Now push. Do your job." Right. Do my job, thought Theodore. But he was frozen. What was he going to do? Fodak and Emily were pushing away with all their might. The old rusty wreck began to make a terrible grinding sound. It was scrunched together with the barge. Tighter and tighter. "Stop!" yelled Theodore. "George is hiding behind the scrap barge. He'll be squished." There, he had said it. Emily and Fodak stopped pushing right away, very surprised. Then everyone heard a small voice from the back of old dock number 9. "I guess I better come out now." Then everyone saw a very sorry and very nearly scrunched George come up from behind the barges. All the tugs were quiet. Finally, Theodore spoke up. "I'm sorry for telling your secret, George." "That's okay, Theodore. I was about to get scrunched. You did the right thing. I was starting to feel pretty squeezed." Well, why were you hiding in there anyway, George? Asked Foduck, who was always very curious. I was hiding so I wouldn't have to have my hull checkup. Foduck and Emily still looked puzzled. George gathered his courage and went on. I'm afraid to go, he said quietly. It was funny, thought George. He suddenly felt better, now that he had told his friends his big secret. It's not too late to go, George, said Emily. George, said Theodore, using his most helpful voice, if you want, we can all go with you. But George only took a deep breath and then moved away. The other tugs kept wondering, what was he going to do? A little later that day, after the tugs had finished moving the barge, they decided to go to the marine yards, just to see if George had gone for his hull checkup. As they floated towards the dock, they all heard a sound from behind a ship. Terrible sound, like someone crying. It sounded just like George. The tugboats moved closer to see what was happening. George had made his choice, and you know what? Much to his surprise, the scraping in the filling hadn't hurt at all. In fact, it tickled. The tugboat saw George grinning way up there in the dry dock. Look at me! This is fun! Then George saw the other tugboats staring at him in amazement. He stopped and put back on his serious George face. Yes, well, he said, clearing his throat. We tugboats have to be ship-shape, right? Then the tugs began to laugh and toot together. And do you know who had the biggest, widest smile of them all? George the Valiant.